millions of loans that are we're all used to in our personal life. And then you have a whole sector of servicers who are not on the blips at all. They're just privately held, and they have private notes that we all get into that the big boys don't even touch or wouldn't touch,
That's right.
right?
That's absolutely. And that's the big problem with data collection. And I think also probably what's so important for everybody, I think we all think that because we have this technology in our hands, that that's technology is like that everywhere. No, it's not, especially not in mortgage, not in credit reporting, not in Experian, all these different things, which is why everybody's waking up suddenly shocked that people who were defaulted on their loans for 5 years are waking up to their credit scores dropping 180 points overnight. Like these things just weren't getting reported to credit. And the way that you do this is very complicated, and it certain things can override others, put it that way.
Mhm.
And so when you're looking at a credit report, you're not always getting the most accurate. I'm sorry, like when you're looking at a credit panel like the Fed does, you're not always getting the most accurate information. So, you know, the other thing to your point, David, is a lot of these specialty servicers aren't on the Black Knight platform, which is the biggest platform that servicers use. That's what the big boys use. And Black Knight is who does all of the delinquency reporting out there, or the lion's share of it in the industry. But they only have a third of the mortgages on their platform. They do have others that will send their data in, but it's not the people that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not those smaller servicers that are actually dealing with the default. And I call them specialty servicers, and so a lot of those folks don't get included in that Black Knight data. And then you say, well, the Fed tracks mortgage delinquency. Well, I wish they track it for the commercial banks. Which, by the way, guys, that schedule should be updated. It should have been updated the middle of April. It still has not been published by Fred.
Mm.
Which I find it's just I don't understand. It should be there. It comes,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
interesting.
quarter, yeah. So yeah, it's very interesting because there's a lot of, I think, I'm not like you, I'm not political, but I just think there's a lot of interesting things going on right now, and
Yeah.
it's more infighting, not. Give me my delinquency schedule. But anyway, the point is that that's just the commercial banks that they're tracking, and what we know is the non-banks do the majority of lending.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
if you're looking at just, and by the way, the commercial banks, some of them, most of them learned their lesson. Some of them definitely did not. But people like Chase, for instance, got out of FHA. They understood how risky that product was. Now others weren't. They didn't learn any lessons, but some did. But so it looks very low. And also, what happens? Fannie and Freddie will sell off all their non-performing loans, as you guys know, and they just
Yep.
announced a big deal. As did FHA has different programs that they use. So,
Mhm.
we just don't, we're not getting reporting from, I'd say, two-thirds of the mortgages out there in
Wow.
terms of like from a servicing platform. You do have that bank, which is about 50% of what the banks have, but there's just so much out there that we don't know about. And so it's
Yeah.
very, and the census did a really cool, it's called the Census Pulse Survey last year. They started it during COVID, where it was a survey about what's going on in your household, and they had a question. Are you delinquent on your mortgage? And what we saw there last year around this time is it was way higher than any number we had seen anywhere else. And
Mhm.
unlike all the other surveys, this survey was actually increasing response. Most of our surveys that have been done before COVID, like the employment survey, they're seeing lower response. And so we just know that we don't have a
Mm.
true understanding of delinquency out there. And then enter in the sub two friends who are out there, an army looking for any sign of default to go in and swoop in. And I think I've got several in my client books right now because I just had a sale stopped in California. And I think it was one of these guys talking to the borrower. And so, because she would not know how to do this, put it that way. So this army, because Pace Morby has 10,000 followers, even more, I don't even know.
Yeah.
They're out there looking for any signs of distress and picking it up, right? At least they
Mhm.
were when they could turn these over very quickly. I
Yep.
think that is starting to change because the appetite has started to change. And so I think we are starting to get an inkling of true delinquency. But if those servicers that you talk about don't report to Experian, and they don't have to, they could report TransUnion, they could not report at all, then the Fed has no idea what's actually going on. And what's
Yeah.
and they just published the Q1 credit panel, and boys, it is insane.
Wow.
Student loans went up like a hockey stick, which we kind of expected,
Yeah.
but we also saw mortgage go up. But guess what's going to be in Q2's credit panel? And this is not even my bombshell yet.
What's
Uh,
that?
it's going to be Affirm is now reporting to credit, and that's buy now, pay later. They started that May 1st. And on FinTwit, you're
Really?
getting and Reddit, you're hearing all these stories about credit being shut down. Like they're actually now being denied, whereas by Affirm, they weren't before. And
Mm.
so I can't wait to see the Q2 credit panel because it's going to look kind of crazy. And we saw the Fed publish their survey of consumer expectations. They have sections where they talk about what actually happened and what consumers expect. This is what actually happened. 41.8% of mortgage refinances were rejected in February. 41.8, the highest
Whoa.
since they
Mm.
started tracking in 2013.
Mhm.
So the consumer is not in the shape that everybody thinks because they when they couldn't get the money in the traditional means,
Yep.
just like the bank stopped lending for mortgages,
Mhm.
they went to a non-bank. They went to the shadow markets.
Mhm.
And that's so we are in a situation where I think the shadow markets are a big part of the story, and
Yep.
no one actually understands. But like you and I were talking before the show, David, a lot of what I say can sound like doom and gloom, but
Yep.
I really only follow the data, I only follow the stats, and I follow what I see with my own eyes. And that's why how I ended up at your conference because I was like, what are these private note things? I need to
Yeah.
understand. And so I'm always asking questions, which is why I really started when I started seeing in my servicing book for my clients things that I had not seen even in the last craze in the run up to the GFC. I really started to get concerned, and I was really I'm focused on FHA because it's much bigger than it used to be. It used to be about 7% of outstanding mortgages. It's now it goes between 13 to 15%.
Wow.
And it's huge. And this is basically government subprime.
Mhm.
Anybody can look up the requirements, but you can go as low as a 580 credit score. It's 3.5% down, as well as if you get into trouble, they have these massive loss mitigation programs where you can take up to 30% of your unpaid principal balance and put it at the back of the loan if you miss those payments. And so
Mhm.
people were just doing this repeatedly over and over and over again. And then the Wall Street Journal, I mean, this is something I've been reporting on for 2 years. The Wall Street Journal came out with a big article that said we had 9 FHA foreclosures last year and we did 500,000 workouts. And what they didn't realize,
Mhm.
and this article kind of called it out, but not as much as you could see in the data, is a lot of this was fraud, David. This was investors taking out these FHA loans,
Oh my Lord.
Really?
claiming owner occupancy.
Mhm.
Instead, it was an investor.
Of
And then
course.
you had actual originators. It looks like actual originators were kind of in on the scheme and telling investors, you won't even have to pay. Like you don't, because we would see certain originators, you can go into Neighborhood Watch, certain originators were showing a 50% early payment default rate. I mean, guys, if we'd had
Mm.
anything like we wouldn't have even allowed ourselves a 1%. Okay. Like that
Yeah.
is something you track religiously. Although I got to tell you, so many of the things that we used to track, and it just feels like a lot of that has gone out the window, unfortunately. And so FHA is very concerning. This is a program that's supposed to be for first time home buyers.
Yep.
Mm.
We had the lowest amount of first time home buyers ever last year. This program has been used by speculators. And what I just recently found, and so let me stop and just see, because I went straight to FHA, but David, you tell me where you want me to go before I go
So
there.
pause there. What I think you were saying before about that, what is not being, because we can all look at the NBA and all that stuff and see what the federal stats are. There's so much stuff that's not being reported, and it's not even credit. Like they can report the credit, most don't, but there's no way to other put anything. We couple of people at the conference talked about. There's no way to upload data to the federal government, right?
That's
There's
right.
no way to track what are wrap notes because you and I both know that they're not putting wrap notes in any kind of federally ran servicers. That's in
Right.
a secondary market, and there's no way to track that. And so there can't be news about it because it's not data that can be tracked.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. And it's just so hard for people to understand. And I got to tell you, I have a client, one of the things I do for them is fill out the schedule to the NBA. So we were just looking at that NBA report, right?
Yeah.
That you had up. Nobody's filling these things out, right? I'm telling you right now, like it's manual. It's by hand, and it's probably
Wow.
relegated to some person who doesn't. I mean, I've seen it in these organizations. It's an Excel, okay?
Hmm.
And the way the questions are worded, it doesn't come with a manual. I mean, you can interpret it however you want to, and there's nobody really to ask on the other side. So I'm just saying that
Mm.
there's a huge picture we're not getting out there. And in times like that, I have to go out, see it for myself, but then I also look around in my own life. Who's a person that I know is doing the worst in my life? Who's the person who's doing the best financially? And then how many of those do I think are out there? Like
Wow.
looking at the stats in
Hmm.
terms of, we know that the top 10% are the ones that own 90% of all stocks. We know that 50% of consumption is done by the top 20%. So, you can really look and see, okay, what's really going on in the economy. And unfortunately, what we have seen is that the bottom of the K has been suffering for a very long time.
Hmm.
The middle of the K has joined the party, and you are now seeing the super prime come under stress for things like failed multifamily deals.
Hmm.
Stocks have rebounded recently a bit, but people are shaken because all of a
Hmm.
Yeah, of
sudden
course.
overnight, people are like, oh my God, this is my retirement.
Yeah.
And I think that we haven't seen the last of those drawdowns in the stock market, but so we're kind of entering a very precarious time where all these shadow markets, all this private credit. I read a great study from a guy who tracks just bank balance sheets. So guess what lending has increased? It's not to mom and pop. It's not to Joe and Jane.
So
It's
the
to
largest increase of notes being created, lending being created.
is to private credit. It's like to these companies like a firm. It's to these. So it's called
Really?
non-depository financial institutions, or
Wow.
NDFIs. And so you can look at the banks, and what they're doing is they're funding all these operations like a firm, which is, I mean, that's a house of cards. I mean, I'm sorry.
Mm.
It just is. And because and so this is very concerning. We've got so much speculation out there in these companies that again are not reporting to the government.
Hmm.
Wow.
So we're missing a giant piece of the puzzle as far as the data is concerned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you don't, and here's the thing. So last night I had the honor, and it was very bizarre to be on a spaces with Steve Eisman. And I don't know if you guys know him, but he's
I don't
basically
know.
Mark Baum from The Big
Yep.
Short.
Hmm.
And it was fascinating to me. If you